Keep pushing.
Record.
Now it says it's recording. It's been a
Oh.
while since we've done this. So we're back.
We're back.
We're officially back. Three years later. So I put it on social media yesterday. I said it's only been 3 years, but we're back, and I've already lost you. Well, there you are. And it's good to see you. How you been?
You too. Good. I mean, I don't think good. It's been like 3 years, so
Yeah, a lot has happened in
that's
3 years.
yeah. I think we both. Wait, I turned 40. I was gonna
I
say we
was
both
all
turned
yeah.
40.
I I turned 44. Let's see, 19. Yeah, I turned 42, 43, and 44.
You turned 40 more, like more than
Yes,
40. Yeah.
40 more.
hmm
I'm closing
Yeah.
in on mid 40s, and we'll talk about
Okay.
that in a few weeks. Just the fun of getting old. Um, but in 3 years, so obviously we've talked in the past 3 years, but I went back and listened to the last podcast that we did. Now check this out. It was in March of 2020, and it was our Corona episode. It's been a minute, and so here we are. Did we? I don't think we didn't conquer COVID, but who knew that 3 years later it would still be a thing? What did you think,
Yeah.
Mark?
Is it? Well, I was thinking about this. Is it still a thing? I mean, it is. I mean, like in the US, for example.
Sure.
Are we saying we're post pandemic, or what are the people saying?
Well,
Or are we?
I don't know. I think that's the interesting thing, and so I mean, let's just jump into it, right? In the past 3 years since we last did this, right? We had the pandemic. I moved from Seattle back to Charlotte, and let me tell you, it's just different. It's different in different in the South than the Northwest, right? I mean, just the
Mhm.
response to it, how people react to COVID. Let's see, so November 2020, I got COVID. Luckily, nothing serious, but um, lost my taste and smell, and that was the craziest thing ever. That was wild. And then, I mean, yeah, there were people um, that I know who passed away. Um, they weren't close friends. My parents had a really close friend pass away, and then some people that I'd gone to church with back in the day. We were lucky, like with a lot of family, no one affected in that way. But how about you?
Um, I've had COVID a couple times now, and most people in my family, but I don't think I've known anyone who's passed away from COVID.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think honestly, the most I've seen it affect is just the work that I do and my work.
Mm-hmm.
I work with the most vulnerable population, so people who are unhoused, who have, um, yeah, just a lot of needs, like basic needs that need to be met. And so, yeah, that was,
Yeah.
I just saw more of the COVID, the pandemic's effect. Yeah, my work. I just had to be super careful. I was taking my clothes off at the door every day,
Mm-hmm.
putting them in a bag and washing them. You know, double masking, N95 masking,
Mm-hmm.
visors, all of that,
Yeah.
goggles at work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now we're back to, yeah, some masking as well because we do like first responder work. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, listening back to some of our old, we only put out a few episodes, let's be honest, but um, I believe there was one where I was talking about, when I was driving, doing Lyft back in Seattle. There was this lady who came in my car one time and had the visor, and I was just like, "What?" It was just the most foreign thing in the world to see someone wearing a mask and a visor, and now you know, it's an everyday occurrence. Who would have imagined
Yeah.
us living in that world, right? And I think that
But
was
wait,
we
was the
talked about.
mask, but was her visor mask thing, was it see-through or shaded?
It was shaded, yeah.
I do remember us debating that. I don't know if it was on a podcast, but I do remember that story.
Mm-hmm.
And my theory was that she must have been a burn victim.
Maybe,
Like that's the only thing I could think of why you would have
yeah,
maybe a visor but of course that was like several months before the pandemic.
yeah,
We didn't know.
right,
That just wasn't our reality. I was like,
yeah,
huh, she must be like shading her face for some reason or have some skin sensitivity to the
right,
sun
yeah, crazy.
or just want privacy. Now we
Could have
wouldn't think twice about it.
could have thought I was a stalker
Right,
potentially,
right.
which I'm
Oh,
not.
right. Was that one of our
But
other theories
it
that
was
maybe she didn't want to be her
just the
identity?
concern for the Lyft drivers who have bad
Right,
reputations.
right.
But things happen.
Yeah.
But so now remind me, did you have this job before um, COVID? Did you
Um,
when did you start there?
oh, right. No, I worked in a homeless shelter before, a different position
Yeah, so new job
when
for you,
COVID
new
hit.
job for me.
Yep. Yeah, new
Um,
jobs for both of us.
yeah, so since the last time we did this, again moving back to Charlotte, working at an amazing place that I never anticipated working at. So we work at a place called Camino, which is primarily for the Latino community here in Charlotte. And we, again, kind of with COVID, even though the at the time they were giving away food and we had a free medical clinic, that sort of thing, before I even came back. Um, but because of COVID, the needs just continue to increase. You have a lot of these people, especially undocumented immigrants, who have no access to any sort of federal funding like so many other people did during the pandemic. They did not have access to that, and so being able to provide
Right.
food and that sort of thing for them, it's really cool. So we came back here in May, and I'll kind of come back and talk about why one of the other reasons that we came back in a little bit, but to see, how that affected so many people in a community that you wouldn't even think about who don't have access to a lot of the same stuff. And so now I work for the church, and Melinda works for the health center, and it's just we'll talk about that again another time. But just so much change, so much happening, and now having kids growing up and having high schoolers, no big deal. But oh my word, I have an almost 4-year old,
I
and
know. That's
it's I noticed
how
like
did
with
you
this, I've got a light here. We're doing we're videoing this also in case you're just listening. But the wrinkles in my face, I need like sure you're gonna have to hook me up with some sort of skincare plan because this isn't working. I feel
Botox?
every bit of 44. Yeah, Botox for sure. Something. I don't know. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, kids growing up, it's crazy. The last time I saw you guys, I mean, your kids were, I know, not the same kids. They weren't little kids anymore, and the same for. We had a thing the other day where I walk in, I was like scared to death because I'm like, who's this man standing in my kitchen? And it's my 14-year-old. I'm like, when did this happen? Like, and he had a mustache and everything.
Yeah.
So it's like what in the world? So it's crazy.
Yes.
And then we're doing the college search thing, like trying to figure out where Maddie's going to go to school, and getting older. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna survive it. How you guys doing
It's
with the college
so,
student now?
well, oh, yeah, I was gonna say it's just so weird because um yeah, it's like a third empty nest. It's kind of nice.
Yeah,
But it does kind of like once, your oldest goes off to college or wherever they go to, move out,
Yeah.
you it's a piece of your family's missing.
Right.
So it's just kind of odd. And then if you think about it, say you have three kids, before
Mm-hmm.
you had your third child, you had two kids. So it was only four of you. But when you have the fifth child, it's like that's your family, or whenever you have your last child.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just different vibes. Now
Yeah.
we have our two youngest at home, and so it's just it's just different. And also seeing your middle child now kind of step up to be the oldest. Um,
Yeah.
it's definitely bonded our younger two together because I think
Mm-hmm.
it's now like them two are the
Right.
team, and then we're the parents, and so it's been good for them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely odd. And you want to do things like as a family, but then I'm like, well, do I wait till my oldest comes home on the weekend, or should I
Right.
just take these two
Just do it.
out and
Yeah.
just they get the treat? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah,
Seems kind of
that's a
weird, but
tricky thing too.
hmm.
And we may have talked about this before. I don't remember, so we'll just hit it now, and we're going to talk about parenting another time. But it is weird to go for us having, our youngest being significantly younger than the other two. Um, there was that time of like morning where it was just the four of us, right? So
Yeah.
now it's like you've got this other amazing little dude. I mean, he's super fun. I
Yeah.
can't imagine life without him, but it's just the dynamic is so different. And then, so I think it was a few weeks ago. It was just me, Melinda, and Maddie and Max, and we're like we don't ever do this. And it was weird, but it was like really fun and cool, and but we don't
Yeah.
do it enough. And it's like they still need that. And then trying
Yeah.
to figure out, okay, how do we like make the most, because the time is is moving quick, and um, so anyway, we could talk for days about that, but it's been an adjustment, for sure. Just you know, in the past 3 years, to go from having a 1 year old, now Micah's almost 4, talking like crazy, but he's super Southern, which is funny. He's the only one of us born in Seattle,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
has this like, when he really gets going, you can tell he's been around the Southern accent. So, and I could tell mine is definitely thicker than it was the last time we did this too. So I'm gonna have to practice losing some of that.
I can't tell right now.
Yeah, I'm probably trying to fight it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Hmm.
because it's funny, being in the South, and that should, again. There's like 50 million topics we could we can take out of this, but being
Hmm.
in the South, and it's again, it's where I grew up, but being around my family, Melinda's family, and we're all kind of just here, and there's been a lot of that. But it's funny. It's either I'm speaking super Southern or I'm just speaking Spanish. So that's
Oh,
and
you speak Spanish at work?
well, I mean, I speak some Spanish. Let's not get carried
Okay.
away. I'm by
Okay.
no means bilingual. I sing in Spanish just about every week, which is kind of
Oh,
fun. So my role is the worship pastor at the church, and so our church is bilingual. So it's really cool. It's two completely different cultures kind of coming together. So everything that happens in our services are English and Spanish. So we sing songs. We're going to sing some parts in English, some in Spanish. The messages are all English and Spanish. It's very unique. It's super fun, super cool, very challenging. But so I'm getting really good at reading Spanish. I don't necessarily know what I'm saying, but I can read it and I
oh,
can memorize a lot and kind of sing it.
wow.
So, but yeah,
That's impressive.
but then when I have to talk to people, it gets kind of not great. So
So they see you singing in Spanish beautifully, like on stage, and then they talk
exactly.
to you and they're like,
Yeah.
that was a
Yeah.
scam. No.
And then there are the moments too, where a lot of times in, church world, the worship guy doesn't say a whole lot, but he typically will say some things and kind of set up different things, maybe read a
Mhm.
verse. And so that is not, I don't do a lot of that here. Partially because other people do it, and partially because
Yeah.
I get kind of lost in the weeds. And also, there was this thing that happened a few weeks ago where everybody just didn't come up on the stage when they were supposed to. And so I'm just kind of standing there by myself, like looking at this group of people who are predominantly Hispanic, speak Spanish, and they're like, and so I just like, all right, ¿Cómo están? You know, how is everybody? And try to fake it, and they're just looking at me like, no, that's not working. No, just stop trying.
Okay. I was going to say something actually when you were preparing this
Yeah.
podcast, like 2 minutes before we started.
Yes.
And you had said, and I was like, oh, this will be good to talk about.
Yes.
And I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but you were saying, because I was like, have you prepared anything? And you're like, kind
Mm-hmm.
of, but not really. Like, I thought about all of this, but then, like, that next step or whatever to,
Yeah.
like, actually come up with any sort of loose
Mm-hmm.
script or whatever. And I was like, oh, that's funny because I don't know if you're the same way, but if I'm like prepping for any sort of project, I always, I just know this about myself now. I do about 80%. And then in my head, I'm like, sweet, I like did the most of it. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm ready. I'll just wing the last 20%
Mm-hmm.
and add a little jazz hands. And then I get to it and I'm like,
Oh
this
shoot.
last 20%, that's why I didn't do
That's the hard work, right? The last 20%.
work. Yeah. Or like the part where I was like, yeah, I'll just wing it. And then I'm like, oh, I did not think about that.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're,
I'm a
if
little
you
bit
do
like
that or
that.
what.
I'm probably a little bit more of the I have a bit of perfectionism in me that
Mm.
also could sometimes paralyzes me. I mean, even like this podcast, right?
Oh,
Like
okay.
it's like I want it to be perfect. I'm like, who cares? Like, nobody cares.
Yeah.
I care, but it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It's like I don't want the, and that's in so many areas of life. It's like even we talk about even Spanish, like we were just talking about learning other languages, like that vulnerability of putting yourself out there with someone who doesn't speak your language and then trying to communicate
Hmm.
with them. And there's, I'm not going to say the words right, you know, and people are always so gracious. You're never like, guy, you're an idiot. Like, learn Spanish already, you know? But there's that fear within me of not doing that. And so I think the same thing with something like this, like the preparation. I'll start doing the preparation, then oh man, there's like so many things that I just have to get it right. This lighting is just driving me crazy, or the sound isn't what it should be, right? All of those things. And sometimes it keeps me from really doing the things that I either want to do because I enjoy it or feel like I should do because it's, you know, the right thing to do.
Oh,
So, but I have a little bit of that 20% too. I'm a procrastinator too, which doesn't go well with being a perfectionist because there's only so much that
a
you can.
procrastinating
Yeah,
perfectionist.
yeah, yeah. That doesn't go. Those things don't really jive very well because
Okay.
inevitably
Yeah.
something's not going to work and you have to fix it. And so yeah,
That is okay. The interesting thing about perfectionism is defining what perfect is. And
yeah,
so, like, who decides what perfect is, say,
right.
for a podcast or like what, and sometimes it's like, I wouldn't even know until I mean, I'd be like, oh, yeah, that was a great podcast.
Hmm.
But then there's like a thousand variations of that depending on who the host is or what we're talking
Yeah,
about or yeah, it's such an interesting concept, perfectionism and what perfect is.
yeah.
So,
And it's so much of that is determined by personality, right? And I know
hmm.
it was even talking like as we're talking about this, I was going back through like trying to figure out okay, what are some things that you and I have talked about with doing this, right? Like because there was something that you and I were texting about maybe a month or two ago, and I was like, oh, that would be a fun podcast topic, or I think you said that actually, and then it just kind of got me thinking like, all right, let's kind of resurrect that resurrect the podcast, right? It's only been 3 years, no big deal. We can still do it. So then I started going through, in your phone, you can like type in a word and like see all the conversations. So I type in podcast and like, we had talked about trying to do this like multiple times over the past 3 years. There was like, something happened in like summer of 2020. And I know that around that time is when we ended up moving. But it was just funny to see like some of that same stuff play out. Like we would have a topic idea. Oh, that'd be fun to talk about that. And then just life happens and you can't
Yeah.
but so much of it within me is like, oh, I want it to be like, be perfect. And so, and that personality type. And so getting to like one of the things that I definitely want us to talk about at some point would be Enneagram and personality. I know we've talked a little bit about that when we interviewed each other, but how that affects so much of how you see the world, how you interact with the world. I mean, it's scary how that plays into everyday life. And Melinda and
Yeah.
I talk about it all the time. She's
Oh,
always
really?
telling me like, Daniel, your presence matters. Like, don't say that, because there's
Oh,
as a Enneagram, as a 9, like that's your biggest fear, or your
or
that
fear
your
of
presence
wound or
doesn't
whatever.
matter in the
Weakness.
world. Like,
Oh,
and so you're always like putting other people ahead of yourself, or you're deflecting, or you decide. I'm not going to decide. It doesn't matter what I think. And so all of those things play into it. So I'm just glad we're here trying it, and we'll see what happens.
yeah. Wow, she's a really good like wife for you to do that and to affirm you in that way.
Yeah, and it wasn't.
And that's why it is helpful to understand.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
and that really, that's what I wouldn't say like saved our marriage. I don't think we were ever in a place where it was like, okay, we're not going to make it, but it definitely changed our relationship in a massive way. Because I mean, this year we'll celebrate 20 years of marriage, which is crazy, and we dated 8 years before that, and so
Yeah.
we've known each other for a long time. But then to really understand, you know, for me to understand her personality and for her to understand mine, and how that affects how we parent, how we treat each other, how we work, how we, interact with our friends, all of those things. And so we're each really sensitive to each other about that. So it's very
Yeah.
helpful. Yeah.
That was really good.
Yes. So we'll definitely have an Enneagram. I want to hear from people, as we build this massive audience that we're going to have. I
Yeah.
mean, the hundreds of
It'll be
thousands of
hard to
people.
contain them.
It will be,
They
but I
can't be
do.
contained.
Yes, I am interested to hear kind of personality types, but what people want to talk about too, because we've talked about kind of restructuring, kind of how we do this. Part of the difficulty in doing a podcast is, you know, do we book guests? Do we, interview people? And while I think we'll do some of that, I think a lot. It was funny. A friend of ours, again, going back to like looking for the different times that we've talked about podcasts. One of our friends sent me a text. It was like, "Man, I miss you guys doing the podcast." I think like just talk about stuff. Like just find topics, talk about it. That's way more interesting than not more interesting than bringing people on, but if you're not gonna do it because you don't have people to interview, like that's not a good reason. Like just come up with topics. If you can schedule people, great. If not, just we like to hear what you guys have to say. So that was kind of fun to hear that.
Oh, don't encourage me.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I was going to ask you something else, and I already forgot what it was. I did make a couple notes, but I
Oh.
can't. Yeah, but my phone's going to die soon, so it's not going to
Oh.
matter. That's that 20%. I don't.
Yeah, I was gonna
Otherwise,
say
exactly.
you wrote down some notes, but your phone's dead.
But I can't find it, and my phone's dead. That seems to always be a problem for me. Yeah, always a problem. I think, one of the things I did want just to kind of update you on, and this is just kind of two friends talking, why I feel like I'm just off today. So, and just to update other people too, like one of the reasons again, that we moved back here to Charlotte. So it was soon. It was actually early on. So I'll kind of share the story as kind of brief as I can. But we were we were kind of early on COVID. We were trying to figure out like what's the long what's the long term plan here, right? Um, schools had shut down, or we're doing just at home stuff, right? And we were renting our house there in Seattle, and the owner came to us and said, at the end of your lease, we're not going to extend it. We're going to plan on selling. And so this was early 2020. They told us this, and so COVID kind of hit Seattle February, March, around that time. I guess it was early March, and we're like, depending, we don't know how long this is going to last. It's going to be a couple weeks, a couple months. I mean, that's what we're thinking. Well, so why don't we see if we can get out of our lease early? We'll go back to Charlotte for a few months. Like, let's ride this wave. We'll go to Charlotte for the summer. I can still work, whether it's remotely or just kind of travel some back and forth. But it's still going to save us a ton of money to stay with Melinda's mom during the summer. And then once COVID's over, August, kids go back to school, we'll kind of figure things out. Save some money, find a new place, maybe buy something, whatever. So then we had only been in Charlotte for a couple days. We were actually going there to kind of temporarily live here, but also our nephew was going to be getting married. And I think it was 2 days after we got here, his sister, so our niece, was in just this horrific car accident, hit head on by a girl who was driving with revoked driver's license, open container. I mean, this whole just speeding. I mean, she was just driving reckless. Hits our niece head on, and it was just devastating injuries, like severe brain damage, broken bones, this whole thing. And so while this is all happening, Melinda and I are like, she's like, I really feel like I need to be here for my sister and to support her. And at the same time, it's like, I don't know what we're going to do long term. But so anyway, very long story short, that's really became the reason that we ended up moving back here, was to be here, support her sister, to be support for the family. It just kind of made sense. It felt like the right thing to do. Then, so this was in May. Then in December, she ended up passing away from her injuries. And I mean, it was just awful. I mean, just devastating. So anyway, saying all that to say today, so we're talking almost, almost two and a half, almost 3 years later, the girl who hit our niece was offered a plea bargain. So they had a hearing and sentencing today. So I think that's just kind of weighed on my head, like I didn't actually go to court. So Melinda, her sister, I mean, all the family went. I stayed here with Micah just to be like, hey, you guys go, like, do what you got to do. I'll be here, kind of make sure he's good, so you don't even have to worry about that. But I'm just like, the whole time I'm thinking, like, what's happening? What's going on? Melinda's trying to text me, but it's in court, So anyway, we find out that, she took the plea deal, and she's going to, has 3 years probation, basically. So it's like, no jail time, no, what feels like no repercussions, right, for this just tragedy that could have been avoided. And it's just this heaviness that's been over the family for 3 years, but especially today, and so even I was like, man, I don't even know if I feel like doing this today. It's like I love, catching up, obviously, and hanging out, but it's like it's just been a heavy thing. And it's been interesting to see, like, the outpouring of support from people, and at the same time, like, the news came out. So with this story, Melinda did a really amazing job of kind of sharing on Facebook and Instagram and that sort of stuff, like how just the story of our niece and the accident, and just there were
Right.
thousands of people kind of following this deal. And so
Right.
as she put out, today's the sentencing, and we're going to find out what's going to happen. People showed up at the courthouse. The Charlotte news people picked up on it.
Wow.
It's on all of the major news networks here.
Really?
It was crazy. I'll definitely send it to you.
Whoa.
We can share the links because it's interesting to see. One of the things that, in the midst of tragedy, so often we all look for, how do we, you want to make sense of it, or you at least want something good to happen out of it, right? And it felt like, just what good is going to come of this? It's like
Right.
for people of faith who, believe in miracles, you pray for a miracle and that miracle doesn't happen, right? And it's a feels like a punch in the gut. And then um, okay, well, if the miracle isn't going to happen, then at least, we can have some sense of uh, closure with at least justice being done, right? And then you feel like that's taken away
Hmm.
too, right? And so now it's almost like, okay, how do we take this and turn something good out of it? And it's the thing that we're kind of talking about now is like the laws need to change. The laws in North Carolina are very kind of weird with that, and I don't know all the details, but it's like, how do you change that? And so it's been neat to see even the people who have picked up on the news story, like justice wasn't done here, and um, how do we change that? How do we change that law? So it's been a heavy, heavy, heavy day, and at the same time, trying to figure out how to cope with that, how to deal with it, and then what's the next step in that. And so anyway, that was a super long update, but I wanted to update you on that too because I know you've been, you know, we tried to keep you guys in the loop on what's happening with that, but it's been wild, and Melinda has carried a lot of that burden too, just of writing all those posts and updating people, and our
Wow.
kids close
I
to
didn't
her, and
know.
so it's
Yeah.
just been a lot,
Yeah.
but we want to keep her memory alive, obviously, and that her death
Yeah.
isn't just in vain either. But it's been challenging for sure.
Yeah. No, that's really hard. I didn't, yeah, thank you for sharing that. I obviously don't look at Facebook or ever go on. So,
Anti Facebook.
yeah, that is, I mean, that's definitely a whole other conversation, multiple
Mm-hmm.
conversations I know that our, I mean, nation has had over the past few years,
Yeah, for sure.
an intensity of even what does justice look like? What
Mm-hmm.
does
Yeah.
prison do, if anything, to
Mm-hmm.
someone? Like, how do we define justice? Does it also, how do we take into account the trauma that they had to then have caused that substance use and behavior?
Yeah.
But also, like, how do we protect how do we protect others?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there's probably some feeling of responsibility. Well, like, I couldn't protect her, so at the least, can we prevent this from happening to other people?
Yeah.
Manslaughter is death is the most serious thing that
Mm-hmm.
can happen. Obviously, like that's what everyone wants to prevent,
Yeah.
whoever you are. So,
Right. This is what's crazy, and I know we'll probably say this over and over again until we actually start getting into a rhythm. It's like, oh man, I want us to talk about this because we've talked enough that there's a lot of crazy things that have happened, some fun stories that we're going to tell over the next few weeks. But one of the things that happened really early on when this accident happened, it was before Morgan had passed away, but the girl who hit her um, actually took a screenshot of um, the picture of Morgan's car. So it had been shared on social media, like, "Hey, pray for our niece. She was in this horrible accident." I mean, at the time she was still alive, so it's like, I mean, it's a miracle that she's even alive. Like, look at this car. I mean, it's just horrible. Anyway, the girl takes a screenshot. Maybe we told you this, maybe we didn't, but like she took a screenshot of this picture, created her own GoFundMe page, and like was basically saying, this is my car. I was in this accident. I suffered like some severe injuries and all this other stuff. Was trying to raise money. So they bring this up today at sentencing, and the judge like he's like, I've never in 20 plus years of doing this, I've never heard of anything like this in my life. He actually called the both the prosecuting attorney or the DA and the defense attorney, the public defender, into his chambers, and I don't obviously don't know what was said back there, but it was like he was not happy, and it was to the point where there was this like glimmer of hope that maybe he's going to intervene and like not accept this plea. And so it was apparently it was intense in there, and he was I don't know if more, he said, in essence, like accidents happen, right? I mean, and you made some really bad choices that day that killed someone, you know. But what you did here is just absolutely outrageous. Like that you made, I mean, just it was crazy, like how upset he was, and so they show all this on the news, right? I mean, because there were cameras in the courtroom, and so it was wild, and but just to think like, that wasn't something you would even think about, 10, 15 years ago, like creating a GoFundMe page and all this other stuff, and so just how the world is different, and um,
Okay, I know we talked about this with the Gabby Petito
oh yeah,
case, but if that was your son
mm-hmm,
or daughter in that situation, maybe they had started using or drinking
yeah,
for a time in their life and got into an accident.
mm-hmm,
Man,
yeah.
I don't even know,
What do you do,
what
right?
would you do
Yeah.
or
So
would
there's
want to happen?
apparently a great show that's out that kind of addresses like it's on one, I don't know if it's HBO, Showtime, something like that. So we'll have to watch that and maybe do a
Oh,
little review of the show, because from what I understand, it's actually the guy who played in Breaking Bad, which is one of my all-time
oh, yeah.
favorite shows. But he's apparently a judge in this show, and gosh, I can't. It's slipping my mind what the name of it is, but I haven't watched it yet. But it's on my list to watch, because it's kind of that same essence. Like apparently his son commits some sort of crime. Again, not knowing the story, and so it's how does he, in his position, deal with that internally, ethically, morally, all of those things. And it's true. It's like with your kids, it's like, what would you not do for your kids? And at what point is it, okay, me loving you is, letting you suffer the consequences for your actions, or do you help them? I mean, that's a whole other ethical dilemma. But I think because of this experience, I think you do want some level, in my opinion, at least for me, um, some sense of justice, and like you need to take responsibility for actions. I've done plenty of dumb stuff in my life that I've been held accountable for, should be held accountable for,
Yeah.
um, and I'm better because of it. It doesn't mean that there wasn't a lot of pain that happened in the midst, and I think, and
Right.
I do think that was the hope. And I know that there's a lot that goes into just the justice system in general. I think so much of this situation kind of got me reading up on like plea deals and all of that. Like the main reason for it is overcrowding and the cost of everything. It's just expensive. It's expensive to drag this out, and the paperwork. It's too much work. Let's just take a deal and move on. And to me, that's not a good enough reason for that. But I don't know you know, all that goes into that. But I know in this situation, it just doesn't feel enough. But
Yeah.
you have to accept it and move on the best you can. And um, we talked so much about it before. It's like, if she would have gone to prison for 20 years, it doesn't bring our niece back. It doesn't bring Melinda's
Yeah.
sister's daughter back. It doesn't
Yeah.
doesn't take away that pain. Yeah, you want some sort of closure and that
Hmm.
sort of thing. You think you might get it from that, but anyway, It's been a heavy day. I thought it would be a little. I was hoping it'd be a little more light. This would be a lighter
No, this is
conversation, but this is what we're about,
great.
right? This is again, it's us catching up. It's us kind of just, hey, this is who we are. This is what what's going on in life, and we'll have other opportunities for some light conversation too. But that was our day today. So it's been pretty wild. All
So
right.
on that note,
Yeah, I know, right? I really did. I don't feel bad about it. It's like it is. It's real life. But I think, yeah, in my spirit, I was like, oh, I want this to be a little bit more light and fun. But it just wasn't. That wasn't today, and that's completely fine.
yeah.
But one of the things that we're gonna do, which I think is fun. Fun is not the right word. Let's think of a better word. But I think I've talked about that before. I use fun way too much. When I don't have a good word, I just go with fun. This will be
I
fun.
say interesting. I say
Interesting.
interesting. And
Yeah.
my coworkers have picked up on it. They're like, "Oh, Sarah said that's interesting."
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, this will be fun.
But no, I think it's fun could be like a good way to like trick your brain into thinking
Mm-hmm.
it is. No, this segment is fun
That's true. So what
and
we're gonna
interesting.
it's gonna be interesting, it's gonna be fun. So we're gonna stick with the story table because this is just a place where we come, we can have some food, we can I kind of had the idea like it's a three-course meal for your soul, really. That's at least how I'm going to look at it. Like,
Oh,
I think there's going to be some fun. Like tonight wasn't necessarily a lot of fun, a little more a little heavy, but that's what happens. You come to the table, you know, you bring the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it, right? But we are going to have as any good three-course meal, you got to have a good appetizer. You got to have the entree and then some sort of dessert. We'll have three segments, and I think tonight's dessert should be you. What kind of recommendation do you have for us tonight? It's going to be Sarah recommends.
so I have a book recommendation.
Yes, I need a good book
It
recommendation.
is it's called Sorry I'm Late. I Didn't Want to Come. One Introvert's
Yes.
Year of Saying Yes by Jessica Pans.
Whoa,
Yeah.
I'm interested. Have you read
Yeah,
this book?
good.
Did you read this?
I read it. I read it in like a week. It
Whoa.
was so
Okay.
good. She made me laugh out loud like
Mm-hmm.
multiple times. I mean, she definitely has my sense of humor.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, no, it was really good. It was like a perfect blend of psychology, but also like real life.
Right.
Um, yeah, and just like lighthearted, but also like very deep moments of her kind of pushing herself out of her
Mm-hmm.
comfort zone and figuring out like why she didn't want to, you know, go out. I mean, I think it's good to read after COVID,
Yeah.
and it's also good to read, obviously, if you're an introvert. It's also good for me as an extrovert to read to
Mm-hmm.
understand my introvert friends
Mm-hmm.
and husband who's an introvert. Um, and I even a lot of the book resonated with me as a tired extrovert. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was
What?
really good.
So give us that name one more time. What is it? I'm typing it in.
Sorry, sorry I didn't want to come. One introvert's year of saying yes.
Okay.
Oh, sorry, I'm late. I didn't want to come.
Oh, sorry,
One
I'm
introvert's
late. All right.
yes.
Sorry, I'm late.
It's
I see it. Okay. Sorry, I'm late. I didn't want
yeah,
to
it's a
come. Introvert's year
good
of living
first.
dangerously. Oh, I didn't catch that
Oh,
part. Living dangerously.
what?
That's what it
I don't
says.
I don't know if
Maybe
that's
that's a second one. Is there
what.
are there two?
I don't know. It's Sorry I'm Late. I Didn't Want to Come. One Introvert's Year of Saying Yes by Jessica Pan.
Huh. Whatever. Okay.
It's a pink book with a cake on the top, on the front cover. But it's a
Yeah.
good first book of the year if you're kind of looking for something to get you jump started with reading goals.
Okay. So here's
Yeah.
what I'm gonna do. Here's my based on your recommendation, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read this before our next
What?
episode. Okay?
The whole book?
I'm going to read the whole book.
What?
Yeah, I like to read. I don't get to read a lot.
Do you?
I do.
Okay.
I don't get to read much. So instead
Okay.
of just scrolling through TikTok aimlessly, like a 14-year-old girl, I can read a good book on introversion. That'll be great.
Okay.
That'll be my homework. So I'm
I'm
gonna
impressed.
I'm gonna read this before we get together again. Give my
Okay.
that'll be my appetizer. Okay. So I'm gonna bring
Okay.
an appetizer to the next. And that's gonna be my report. My takeaways from Sorry I'm Late. I didn't want to come. I'm excited about that. Good
Cool.
recommendation. Good first recommendation.
Yeah.
Cool. Sarah, great to catch up. So good to see you. I've missed you.
You
I'm
too.
glad that we're doing this, and we're gonna do it again soon. So, season 3, episode 1, in the books.
In the
Let's
books.
not wait 3 years to do it again.
Okay.
Cool. See ya.
Deuces.